So not to be too dramatic, we are living in what might be called dangerous times. Also, other words to describe them are unknowable, unthinkable. Meaning that things are changing so dramatically that it's hard to know or think or imagine, let's say unimaginable. What's next? And there is a sense of danger in that things that have been known and predictable, definable, that created a sense of kind of mutual security has been upended on some fundamental level. Some of you are looking directly into that. Some of you are looking elsewhere. Some of you are not looking at all. And I've spoken to many people, and I'm picking up all those different sensibilities. There are people who simply cannot afford internally to enter into looking or seeing, and are putting on the blinders, staying close to home, staying close to their own private security system. I'm not being critical or judgmental on any level. There are millions of different responses to the world around us right now, and for those of you who are kind of not reading the newspapers, not listening to the news, not being part of the larger culture, and I've talked to many people like that, that's a response. It's a fair response. For those of you who wake up traumatized every morning, that's totally understandable. For those of you who think this is all manageable in some larger scheme of things, that somewhere down the road things will all work themselves out, probably true on some level. For those of you who wake up scared in the middle of the night and wake up scared in the morning, you got work to do. There's stuff to be done. So there's so many responses to what's happening now in our environment, and a lot of it comes down to a kind of grief. And grief is not something we all experience on a regular basis. There's a certain kind of natural grieving that comes with natural loss of parents and loved ones and people around you who, in some natural progression, leave the world we're all familiar with, and we bid them farewell. We feel sad, we feel at a loss, we feel deprived, but it fits the system somehow. Then there are kinds of grief that come out of nowhere, the kind that totally upends your world. It shakes up everything. And some of you have probably experienced that. I have not had a lot of that experience in this lifetime. I've certainly watched it on the news. I've certainly had a feel for it going on in our world. I think we all have a kind of quote unquote fear of it happening to us, and a kind of sense that it maybe will never happen to us. That's kind of the illusion most of us live in, and definitely try to protect ourselves against unexpected grief, but there isn't a lot we can do. The grief that has emerged right now in a collective sense is very, very powerful for those who are engaging it and caught up in it. And there is at the core of grieving a kind of shattering of norms, a sense of life is not what it was, nor do you know if it will ever come back to what it was, which is difficult, and what to do when you feel as powerless as these circumstances require, because powerlessness is at the core of grief. There's nothing you can do, really, in terms of changing the larger dynamic of the universe. The only grief I ever experienced, really ever, which was a shake-up of the whole system, was, all of you have known the story, my LSD trip in the 1960s, where every single tenet of believable truth was gone. Nothing I had taken for granted, nothing I had assumed existed once that night of that LSD trip took place. There was no reality left. There was no truth as I knew it left. Everything was different. I remember going to a payphone on the corner of Bank Street in New York and calling my parents, or wanting to call my parents to say, who am I, what is all this, what's going on? And as I started to put my dime in the phone, I said, this is ridiculous. I have no parents. There's no reality. That there is nothing past the Hudson River. There's no Detroit. It was all part of a mindset, and I was that mindset. That's all I was. And right at that moment, it was being revealed to me as what I later learned was like a bardo state. The Tibetans call it the bardo state, which is a state of mind manifested. And that state of mind at that moment completely was totally different than anything my life had prepared me for or had instructed me into knowing. So I came back from that huge experience and went, what was that? Because I came back to a form of reality, but it would never be the same. And I needed to know what I had gone through. And this friend of mine gave me the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu song of God. And I started reading it, and it was like just understanding upon understanding upon understanding. And I realized that there were worldviews that I could kind of now begin to put into place that would give me a new kind of security, a new kind of knowing. And the first thing I thought I had to do was to get myself to India or Tibet, because then I started looking into Tibetan teachings. And even before I got there, I also started looking into the perennial philosophy that Aldous Huxley talks about, which is the mystical underpinning of every religion. And so I started getting answers, lots and lots and lots of answers, and felt secure in that I'm not the first person to be here. I'm not the first person to experience grief. I'm not the first person to have his world blown apart, or her world blown apart. There were people who've been there before and who wrote about it, including people like Buddha, who started to teach really in an interesting way that basically everything is impermanent, life is suffering, and what do you do about it? He talked about right action, right thought. He had a lot of principles of things you could kind of do to begin to figure out how to live in the world that now has been shattered. How can you bring it back into a kind of day-to-day focus so that you can get through a day? And there were so many other practices out there, and I started sort of imbibing all of them that I could. And it was really a fascinating journey for me, because basically I was told that the universe was unknowable, unimaginable, really, on some level, and that it was dangerous. That it was all of those things. That it was not an illusion that stuff hovered around. It was an absolute truth, and that at some point in time it would probably take its toll on my sense of what is real and secure. So that LSD trip began the journey of saying, you've got to figure out how to live in a world that is unthinkable, unknowable, unimaginable, and dangerous. So the thing I did back in the 60s was I stuck out my thumb and I began a journey by myself, first of all to Greece, where I just went to sit and think and know about all these things. And I went with so many books that I couldn't carry them, and I had to have a donkey get me to my house with the books on the back of the donkey, because I had to sit and read all these things. And then I sort of got there and I thought, these books aren't going to provide the answers. And I started sitting still, and that was vaguely interesting, but I felt wildly alone and uncertain and unmoored from the world. And then I decided I better go to India, and then I hitchhiked to India, and I started meeting gurus and teachers and sadhus and all of these people looking for the truth, the answer that would give me some kind of sense of ultimate security and comfort. And I didn't find anybody. And you've all heard this, but I talked to so many people and listened to so many people, and I didn't trust them really. They all had a shtick, a spiel. forgive me, but I didn't know that any of them had the answer. And then I met Rudy when I came back from a year and a half of all of these different adventures, which were really powerful because I went on my own, because I realized I had to do this. It was not going to come out of a book or a sadhu. It was going to come out of my moving myself into the unsafe world. And that was a great, important adventure. And maybe the most important thing I learned is that we're in this by ourselves. When I met Rudy, I thought, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. There's somebody who gets this and who gets me. And I started sitting with Rudy, and I would have these unbelievably energetic exchanges, these kinds of explosions of connectivity and breaking down of things in myself I didn't even know were there, these kind of footholds into a kind of security and reality that in fact was not real. And Rudy would go and blow it away, and I was like, oh. And I really, really depended on Rudy to help me work my way into the world of the unknown. And then he died. And I went, wow, okay, now what? So I continued with other people who were trying to teach and found that their footholds in the world of the unknown were not any stronger than mine, really. And so I, in the end, left everybody. I left all of that with my wife and 2 children. And moved to Illinois and did nothing for a while, and then somebody sought out, would I teach them? And I knew I had stuff to teach, but I didn't know what I had to teach other than open-hearted connectivity and energetic exchange with other people. I knew through Rudy that I had found my heart, that I had found, in a way, my gut, that I had found some open-mindedness and some ability to work in the world, which was really important, really valuable. And so I started to teach a small group of people, which gradually expanded, and I found that one thing I could offer people was I could love them. And boy, was that meaningful. Boy, oh boy. So I just loved them. I just loved, and it was very easy for me to do for whatever reason. And so I just reached out, and then it was time for me to reach for something bigger, for a greater adventure, if you will, which was to pursue what was my film career. And as you all know, it was terrifying to leave the security, although the desert-like security of Illinois, to go to Hollywood with no anything waiting for me, nothing. But I had a wife who believed in me, and we had this sense that let's just make it happen, and we went, and of course that leap of faith brought about a lot of activity, a lot of evolution, growth, you might call it, distraction from my central sort of being, except that I said, whatever happens in Hollywood, I'm going to keep teaching. I'm going to keep this thing going. And I did. I never missed a week of teaching. I'd never missed a day of sitting, which was always fundamental in my life and something I'd promised Rudy I would do, just sit every day long enough to get quiet and centered. And I taught even when I was directing a movie. You know, I mean, some of us know how hard that is. I kept teaching. And it was incredible because it grounded me on some level and it made everything else possible. And this career was wonderfully expressive, and a lot took place, and then it was over. It was over. I don't work anymore. And it's like the entire identity of that career was gone. And that's, boy, oh boy, now who am I? I'm a was. I'm not an is for most people. You know, go to a cocktail party, you'll see how quickly that shows itself. You know, who you were is not important. This isness was important, truly isness. And then I became the biggest is I've ever been, which is a grandpa, which is very defining and very satisfying and very large and completing. But I was bringing up my grandchildren in a world that I knew, in a world that was comforting, a world that had promise, a world that was civilized, a world that was kind-hearted, and offered possibility for them. And then, a month ago, as you all know, that world was turned upside down. And it was exactly like my LSD trip. It was like nothing I believed to be true was any longer true. There was a completely different perspective on all of this stuff, completely different. And it's unfolding slowly because I had, in the 6 years ago or so, this what's called an awakening. An awakening meaning that the filter of Bruce Rubin suddenly disappeared into a non-filtered experience of day-to-day life, which is, some people think it's about bliss and transcendence. It's really about being totally unprotectedly open to the whole of being. So trust me, every little child in Aleppo is part of my genetic system. Every person who's living in coal country who doesn't have a job is living within my system. My heart has been cracked open and open and open. But when this election happened, I kept thinking that kindness would somehow prevail, that civility would prevail, that we would find a solution, because this has been an amazing country. This is a country of highly civilized potential. We have such opportunity, have had it, and have been working our way through it. Of course, we have all come to understand, especially recently, that none of the systems we have evolved are working very well, and that huge portions of our society are in terrible trouble. Whether we have found a solution that will work to that is up for grabs. 50% or almost of the country thinks so. I am not in that particular realm. I tend to think that what's going on is really untenable and unfortunate, and I wake up in the morning unhappy and scared. Scared not for Bruce, not even really just for my children and grandchildren, scared for everyone. Because we built this country. We built a world that was so powerful and potential, and yes, imperfect, and yes, it's been like that from the beginning, but it had such wonderful structure that it had the potential to help lift up humanity and lift up the people of this country, and now that seems in question. I've never lived in a time where things seemed in question like that, ever. And here I am. And I think about this thing of coming here on Sunday morning and talking to you. And what am I going to say? Do you want to hear a teacher who says he's scared? Probably not. Do you want to hear somebody who has no answers for you? Probably not. Do I have anything to offer? Yes. Yes. I really love you. I really love you. And I don't mean it you, I mean every one of you. I really have a big heart that Rudy taught me to open. I have a big grasp. I have a capacity to share that. So maybe I should shut up and not talk and just send the love and let it be that. But, I have students elsewhere who don't get to sit with me, and therefore the talk is a vague approximation of the love that I'm feeling. But I will acknowledge this is a fearful time for this being. It's fearful because I feel every molecule of fear that's out there. I feel every molecule of hope, and I feel it from a place of enormous compassion and love. And I'm trying to figure out day to day, just like you probably are if you're engaged in this, what do we do now? And part of the answer is that the doing is not doing but being. Maybe there is doing to be done, and I'm certainly exploring that possibility. What can I do? But the real thing that I know I can do is be present with whoever is there around me. But that presence I can feel is being impacted by what I see in the newspaper, what I read on Politico, what I get from the outside world, which is not a perfect impression, but it's an impression. It's impacted by that, and it definitely creates this sense of great sadness. So I share that with you. And this morning, Blanche sent out to you a video that somebody sent me, and I don't usually share these videos, because I don't know that I always think that's the answer, but this was so simple. And you'll all have it on your computers when you go home, and it's really just a Muslim man standing on a corner, or actually across from a Trump hotel, saying he's scared and asking people to hug him. That's all it is. And it, to me, the power of this man standing there, announcing with such vulnerability his fear, knowing that many people who look at him will be fearful of him for reasons that are ungrounded really, but part of this human psyche. And just standing there, and he blindfolds himself as well. Mm. And he just says, do what you will here. And it's a funny little gesture on some level, but it is a gesture of putting oneself into the mix and trying to somehow connect in a way that you might not have a month ago to the population, to the world, to people around you. What can you do? What is your journey here? And I think that's what's really important. I went and saw, I'm on the Academy, I'm in the Motion Picture Academy, and they send me all the movies. And I vote to nominate and to select best screenplays and best picture and all that kind of stuff. So I've been watching movies recently. A good many of the movies we're seeing right now have to do with grief. The two biggest ones, which are very powerful, are Manchester by the Sea and Jackie. The thing that Jackie taught me was how alone you are in grief. There is no sharing grief, period. It's your journey. Nobody can do anything to get you through it. They can't give you advice. They can't talk you through it. They can't give you spiritual lessons. All they can do at the very most is touch your shoulder or give you a hug. That's all you can do, period. The movie Manchester by the Sea really shows you how hard it is to go beyond grief. The journey beyond grief, and how it's not a Hollywood ending. And one of the things that taught me was that I have been culpable over the course of my career of creating Hollywood endings. And Hollywood and TV and even the news are all working to create happy endings for us. And happy endings may not be real. We want them, we need them, we hunger for them, but what to do with them? And then last night I went and saw La La Land, which is happiness incarnate on some level, but goes beyond that. And I sat there thinking like I was my parents in the Depression, and how they went to see Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire dancing and making music. And as I was sitting there during the movie, I just felt removed from the suffering of the world, removed from the worries for 2 hours, which is what everybody went to see those movies for. Get me out of all that for 2 hours. And I sat there thinking, thank you, Hollywood, for 2 hours of something that was so beautiful and so moving and is really, truly a wonderful film, that they all are. And I understood the value of storytelling, the help of it, the space we can all enter that removes us for 2 hours from that darkness of the world, yet we all come back to it. On the other hand, I came back to it with my heart more open, with more love in it, a gratitude for the beauty that life still offers, and that knowing that the journey to that love, the journey to that expression of joy and beauty is the salvation of each of us. I tell you all this, but I walk every day, more and more now. I mean, longer and longer, because I need to work through stuff. I need to be in the world. I need to move. I need to smell the roses, literally. I need to look at the trees. I need to look at all the fallen leaves and know that every one of them had a story. I need to walk through the streets and see people and actually acknowledge them and say hello to people and feel the world again, feel it, be in it, walk through it, and recognize that the world knows nothing about the politics that are surrounding us. It knows nothing of that. It couldn't care less. In fact, the world has gone through cycles like we're going through many, many times. It's really our history. It's the history of mankind. It's the history of the world. You go through it. Things change. You know, at one point I decided I wanted to listen to some music, so I put on Bob Dylan and I put on The Times They Are Changing. Well, you know, look, that's a great song. You know, from whatever perspective, whether you're in a good time or a bad time, the times they are changing. It's always changing, guys. It's always going through this dynamically or quietly, but it's always in transformation. and we're always part of that. And that was really important. And then I put on some Hindu chanting, Krishna Das. And I just started listening to that. And of course, those of you who've ever been to bhakti yogi gatherings, you know, my friend David Newman goes around the world doing these things. They are the most uplifting, beautiful, sweet, kind, embracing moments. And you just feel so alive and wonderful and just grateful. And so I recommend Bob Dylan. I recommend listening to chanting and chanting along with it. I recommend taking long walks. I recommend sitting very deeply and finding your own heart in the middle of all this. I recommend finding one thing you can do, whether it be standing on a street corner offering hugs, or whether it just be going up to people in your family and hugging them. Whatever it is, transformative energy is your reaching out, not just being passive. You can be passive, you can go into a cave, you can go into a Buddhist monastery or Catholic monastery or whatever works for you, and you can just sit. But I'm telling you, the great thing that Rudy taught me was life is your spiritual life. This is your spiritual life. Use it. The dynamic of your day-to-day existence is everything. What do you want to do here? Do you want to sit here and moan and cry and be miserable? Or do you want to turn that around internally? And if you do turn it around internally, which you can do, the real alchemy of existence is learning to go into your own heart and turn fear into love. That's true alchemy. That's what we're here to do. That's what we're being taught. That's what Rudy taught me. Turn this thing into something that you can share. Be vulnerable in it, be open, be honest, be scared, but do it. That's the role. That's the role for all of us, to take charge of this moment, because we have a little bit of a spiritual awareness that something bigger is going on, something greater, and we can partake in that. We can be part of the system. We can be part of the solution. And the solution is, you figure it out. But it's private, it's personal, it's you. It's not a collective. I mean, you can go on marches to Washington if you want, but the real thing that's going to happen is within you, with yourself, with the world around you. Start with your family, your friends, and branch out. This is the journey we're all on. We are living in a world of danger. We're living in a world that is unknowable, unimaginable, unthinkable. We're really in it. But the truth is, it's never been otherwise. The only thing that's been otherwise is your fantasy and your illusion or delusion, and the fact that that has been wiped away is ultimately a gift. This is a gift. It's a horrible gift on some level. But I have met people who've gone through great grief, and there's two sides to that. One is you wake up crying every day for the rest of your life, and the other is you discover the core of what life is. One or the other. Make the choice. But you're on it now, and you're in it, and you're on your own, other than you have a certain opportunity to come here and get reinforced in that. You're still on your own. No, I can't do it for you. You can't do it for me. We do it for each other. And this thing of love, which appears to me to be the great salve, the great healing power, love going out comes back. You can throw it out as deeply as you want. You will get it back just as deeply. And you will be able to thrive, and you will be able to learn and express compassion in a world that needs it. So that's my Sunday morning homily. This is so important. And I mean, I haven't talked to each of you individually, nor do I want to, about this stuff. But I gotta say, find who you are in this. Take it on seriously. Find your path, own it, and express it as carefully, lovingly, and humanly to the people around you. Any questions?
You were awakened and open to the 60s and experienced that turmoil and tumult that changed so many precepts from the previous era. And you lived through it, we lived through it, and it seemed to have turned into something fairly upbeat over the course of the next few decades. So how do you compare this time with that time, and why do you think this time is inherently different?
There seemed to be in the 60s a desire to break out of constriction and to open to something bigger and greater that was more loving, more accepting, more embracing of the possibilities of life. This appears to be constricting, contracting, and governed by impulse and ignorance. That's a very different force. I haven't been around to see that force manifest in such a powerful way as it has in just the last month. And all the signs point to it getting worse rather than better. The balances that I maybe hoped and prayed for a little bit in the bargaining that I did with the universe was that somehow these things would work out. I don't see that at this point. I have a really dark vision of the future, and I don't mean to lay that on you guys. It may or may not be true. But it's filtering in a very big way. And I'm trying to figure out, what do I do in all of this? What's the big plan? I mean, I even looked to buy land in Crestone, Colorado. You know, a friend of mine is building a house there off the grid. And I thought, whoa, maybe we should just go hide. But then it really hit me. There's no hiding from this. There's nowhere to go. We're planetary. You know, it's not like in the 60s you could go to Canada and get away from all this. You know, the environmental impact of what's going on, that's just, I mean, what's happening is so big, so unfortunate on some level, so maybe necessary. You know, the universe may be looking at all this and just going, there's too many people, get rid of a third of them. I don't know if that's what it is. I mean, it can work that way. Mother Nature is rather dispassionate in that regard. You know, we're messing everything up. Get rid of everybody. Get rid of this. It doesn't need us. We're the ones who feel so passionate that we need to be here. We care so deeply about our personal selves. It may not. And this may just be part of the force that's at play to wipe the slate clean somewhat and see what comes out of it. I really don't know. That's a very dark version of it, but you know, we're programmed for that through Hollywood. Hollywood has given us apocalyptic fantasies now for a couple of decades, and it's given us superheroes. It's always giving us superheroes to fix everything. And so we've, you know, when Superman flies around and, you know, fixes evil, that's great, but, you know, what do you do when evil enters the White House? And we've had movies about that. You know, we've had all of this stuff. Our minds are we're ready and prepared for the worst of the worst, only now it's not a Hollywood movie. You know, so I don't know, but the 60s were different. This is different. It may turn around in 2 years. It may turn around in 4 years. It may not turn around for decades. I have no idea. But I got grandkids who are going to grow up in that. You know, Star Wars came out the other day. You know, the Rogue One. I don't know, but it's about an insurrection. You know, and you know, some of the big movies of the last several decades are about revolutions. You know, big the populace rises up against the system. I don't want my grandchildren in that. They may be, but you know, my storytelling is happiness and, you know, love ever after. May not be the real story. You know, who knows?
I don't know. I've always lived somewhere between everything.
Between what?
Everything.
Uh-huh.
Like somewhere in the middle, like the white space between the writing on the...
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I remember all these things that happened in me. Like this morning, I was getting ready and I was just thinking in my thoughts, I really can't trust that. I was saying, I really can't trust that. And right before I left, I decided to look on my emails, and the email said, trust from you. Things like this are what run my life. And that's what separates me out from all the stories. I've never really been in any real story enough to identify with anything. And call me a Pollyanna, but thank you.
Let me just throw this out for a moment, because I think it's important. Part of my LSD trip, part of my awakening, part of my spiritual journey has led me to a place where I know that in the beginning there's nothing, and in the end there's nothing. And I have lived in the space of nothingness at times along the way, and it is very, well, it's really truly nothing. Getting to nothing means you have to give up everything. And a lot of us don't know what that means until we're called upon to give it up. So the process of doing that in normal life is what we call a natural process. You come into the world, you build a life, you have connections, you have joy, you have suffering, you have all of these experiences, and then you leave it graciously. That's the perfect life. And I have been blessed that I have been given the vision of nothing and something. People around me are caught up in something. I am still in a body and still in something. The great spiritual teachers that I've known, as much as they are aware of the great emptiness that we essentially inhabit, they too are in body form and know that. To teach people, don't worry, it's nothing, it's all going to go away, it never adds up to anything, it's meaningless, blah, 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 whatever that is, that's a teaching. And it could be the teaching that I could offer you, and I don't think it would create any semblance of help for anybody other than to give you a fantasy of, oh, well, this is nothing. For me, life is so unbelievably real. I know it's unreal. I know it doesn't have substance ultimately. But there is something to be said for, and I've talked about this a lot, nothing turning into something, turning into brute matter, and brute matter, fiery, dense, heavy matter, turning into plants, trees, breathing things, human beings, life, love, joy, beauty. What is that? What is that? I can't give you an answer to it, but I know that I walk down the street and I witness it. I know I feel it inside, and I know that ultimately it returns to nothing, whether that nothing is computer code and digital, whether that nothing is some godlike embrace from something we can't even imagine. I'm not sure I can tell you that. I can tell you that I have felt it. I can tell you that I trust it. But that's all I can say. Meanwhile, what do we do here? And even the greatest of saints have had to go through the loss of this, and I don't know any of them who've wanted to go there. You know, Christ, I talk about Christ all the time, and his "take this cup from my lips." Nisargadatta, one of the great teachers, author of I Am That, when he was dying of throat cancer that he had created himself, I guess, because of smoking how many packs of cigarettes and running a tobacco shop. He was not a happy camper at the end, because his whole system was causing unbelievable suffering. We're human beings. Let us help each other as human beings. I know there are people out there who will teach, light and beauty and dispassion and and release from all of this. Rudy would say, when you die, that's when you'll learn it. I've always felt, I thought awakening would give me that personally. I thought awakening would be, thank God I'm done. Total opposite. It's like, oh my God, I'm beginning. I am beginning. I had no idea that letting go of Bruce was the beginning of the big trip. Being Bruce was the limitation. And the big trip is unknowable to me. It's every day it gets bigger and bigger. And now there is this new political climate, and I'm going, that's not what I was imagining. But it has nothing to do with what is imagined. It has to do with what is. That's all I can tell you. And what to do with that, we can live between the cracks. We can live in the middle of things. We can all do that. We do on some level. And in a way, I think we're all protected. I've tried to, probably I did it here, to talk about watching movies about the end of the world in a theater and eating our popcorn and drinking our Diet Coke or whatever it is, and finding ourselves, the world's coming to an end. Oh, look at Los Angeles just went down. And we do that with the popcorn. It's so good. Maybe spiritual life may be that. I can't promise anything except I know we're in it. This is it. It's real. You wake up in the morning, it's not going away, and it's going to get probably worse on some level. How are you going to interact with that? And are you going to put your head in the sand? Are you going to stop going to meditation? Everybody's going to have some sort of choice to make. It's your job. It's your ride. This is one place of possible guidance for what to do. And it's not a lot of guidance, except take it on and be real with it.
How do I communicate? I can't do it for you, to people. Like to my sister, my buddies, hey, come see me, I want some of this good energy. How do you communicate to people in a compassionate way? I can't, you're going to have to, this is your trip. This is your trip.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's really hard. They don't want to hear it. I think all you can do, and what I try to do, because I am surrounded by that, is love them. Just love them. Hold their hand, wish them well, tell them what you do. You can't do it. No, you can't fix people. Nobody can be fixed. The fixing is an internal process. The place you know you need to go for repair and guidance is here. Everything outside you will be imperfect. Everything outside you is temporal. This is not necessarily temporal. This can create a kind of, fix is the wrong word. The non-dualists out there, and I'm really sort of one of them, will tell you it's not broken. It's not broken. You're not broken. You're real. You're a human being who's scared, who's not going to live forever, for whom life is an unknown entity. Accept that and watch what that does to you. When you realize you're just scared, you're being scared is real. It's part of the totality. Embrace all of that and you will touch what life is. You will touch life in the raw nerve of it. And the raw nerve of life is everything. That's to be alive. What does it mean to be alive? I don't know, but we are that. And to hide from that, to cloak yourself, to back away from it, to drink your way out of it, drug your way out of it, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. You're only going to get it by being in it. And the most you can do for others is love and compassion. Listen to them. Express empathy. Not just express it, feel empathy for them. Know what they're going through. Because people are really suffering. And they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They're going to march on Washington, I guess. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from people. I don't know what that will do. It might be helpful. It helped during Vietnam a little bit. We're going to figure it out a little bit at a time. But you've got to figure out what you can do inside, because that will be real. Everything outside will be a display. It'll really be a display. Yeah.
But then when you tell them, hey, now it's 3 times, it's 4 times now. Now I can't. I really, want to wish you well, and I got to move. The rage that comes the rage that comes at you. The rage that comes on the streets when you're not driving fast enough, and the person behind me is up on a foot from my bumper, reaming me for not driving faster than the speed limit, and I refuse to. I'm going the speed limit.
Last week I talked about an experience in San Rafael in which I was with my grandson in a wonderful store of tribal art, basically. It was a wonderful shop, but the door was open, and on the street there was a truck, and I didn't notice it, but there was a Hispanic man sitting in the truck, and a guy walking down the street stopped in front of the truck and started yelling profanities at this man. Get out of my country, get out, just horrible. And I'm listening, I go, I have never in my life seen that, ever. And I wanted to go out there and just do something, talk to him, but I had my grandson. And I just felt I can't risk, and I wouldn't risk anything with my grandson, but I so desperately wanted to get in the mix on that. I'm not sure that's the right answer, but it made me aware, just like I suspect, forgive me, I reference Nazi Germany a lot, but 1938, when things started happening and people were given license to express their hostilities, you realize how much hostility exists. I have been aware from various circumstances of how thin the veneer is of civilization. It's really very thin, and it's disrupted in an instant, and it can be disrupted globally. And the fact that we have civilization is such an unbelievable attainment. We live in a time of grace, really, because of that, and that grace is now disintegrating on some level. Well, it will go away completely. Well, it can't go away completely because you exist. That's why. It cannot go away completely. One way or another, you find your way of expressing it. I was telling someone the other day, if I was on one of the trains to Auschwitz or something, packed with people, and somebody next to me was suffering, and somebody reached out and just put their hand on their shoulder, that gesture in that moment where everyone was suffering, and yet one person chooses to be kind to another person, that's what it comes down to in the end. Real heroism is small gestures and trying to be part of what we call the resistance. The resistance meaning I will not give in to bestiality and immorality and hostility and anger and fear. I will try my best to be an expression of what I know to be civilized, loving content. And that's what we're here to try to do. And if you do that, I would celebrate that. If I was writing a movie, that hand on the shoulder on that train would be the end of the movie. That's the happy ending of course, it's not happy, but it's what this is about. It's what our lives are about.
Charlene and I were listening to a program about Standing Rock on the radio last night when we were going to a party, and they were talking to this medicine man who didn't expect to be a medicine man. His grandfather was one of the great Lakota teachers, and his older brother inherited that, but he was killed in a motorcycle accident. All of a sudden, this guy's thrown into the family thing, and he felt unprepared, and they're in this camp, and there's a rumor that the police are going to come across the river and attack them. And he says, well, I've got to go talk to him and see what's going on. And he said he told people around him, this is my name if anything happens, because he figured they were going to shoot him. They were all wound up. And he walked across the bridge with his hands up in the air. And they said, what do you want? He said, there's been a rumor about you guys are going to attack us. No, that's not going to happen. And then he said to them, I'm on your side. You really don't want your children to be drinking polluted water. And you don't have to be doing this job. I mean, you're trying to feed your families. You could lay your badge down now before you do something that will cause you to regret it for the rest of your life. And he said he saw guys shaking their heads in agreement. And then he turned around and went back to the camp.
But that is the kind of individual heroism that people are called to in difficult times. We don't have to worry about that in the 1950s usually. I mean, other than the McCarthy hearings, most people just had to go about their day. But when you get into a time where there's really a challenge to the status quo, little gestures are everything. And that wasn't so little, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. This guy was thrust into the situation. We have all been thrust into the situation. And if it comes upon you, find a way to be the best version of you possible. I think that's what we can do. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And to understand that if there's some accountability in the long run, and I think there may be, those little gestures make you worthy in your own eyes and in the eyes of that which loves you. There's one more hand somewhere.
I was just going to sort of add on my experience with the teaching. I know there have been times where I'll be in that state of bliss during meditation. I'm like, oh shit, Bruce is now going to talk, and he's going to talk about reading the newspaper, and he's going to pee all over my bliss. What I realized was, it had nothing, that was I could go be in that bliss, go on the freeway and have someone on my bumper and lose my shit just as easily. And I don't know if you knew, but I've had land in Crestone for 15 years. I did a Vision Quest there like 16 years ago. And it's interesting because in my mind there's like this place that I have that I can go if all hell breaks loose. And I haven't done anything with it. And yet I realize there's this place within me that I can always go when all hell breaks loose. And it's that interesting dynamic of the two that I appreciate about your teaching. And that it's not just, here's your silence.
It's not just peeing all over your bliss.
That pee is well.
I think I'm going to title this talk, Peeing on Your Bliss. I mean, trust me, that Crestone thing is like having some sort of vague sense that there's safety somewhere. And I subscribe to that as much as I can, because I think internally there is a kind of place that is perhaps a safe zone in us, within us. Finding it outside, I don't know if that exists all that well. I really do question coming into this class and giving this kind of talk. I really do question it. And I really keep thinking, as I've said many times, if nobody shows up next week, I get it. I totally get it, because I don't want to pee on your bliss. But I really do need to share the journey that I am going through, and that I can't do better than that, and I can't do anything other than that. And I don't care if anybody wants to hear it or doesn't want to hear it. It's my truth. I'm asking you to share your truth, whatever that may be, on every level, whoever you are, with whoever you share your truth with. And if you can do that, that will be very beneficial if you do it with compassion and love.
And that's what I appreciate, because it shows me where I'm at. If something's going to be able to push me off of my center, that's my teacher.
Well, bliss is hard won and hard to maintain. And there are times where, it will be challenged, and this may be one of those times. Maybe not. Maybe you can ride it out in a state of of pure continuing bliss. I think there are people maybe like that. It's not what I'm teaching at this point in time. You know, I mean, I definitely can sit down. I sit with you. I sit with myself. I go on my walks. There's bliss beyond belief, but there's, you know, we live in a world where there's bliss and ignorance all moving together at the same time. One has to do the work. Okay. Not only have I peed on your bliss, I've taken a lot of your time. So I love you guys. Thank you for coming. We'll be back again in mid-January. I wish you all a really Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is going to be an incredible year. There are great teachings in the Christmas story, so maybe pay attention to that. The New Year, as you all know, is not all that new, really. It's just another day. On the other hand, you can renew who you are and what you are internally, and that's a great gift. Thank you.